One requirement of Supervised Ministry 302 is for you to write an autobiography, including your call statement. This is to be presented to your field supervisor for discussion at your initial meeting, and also it is to be sent to me on week number 3. Now, to assist you in writing your autobiography, let me share this PowerPoint lecture with you. Now, what you'll learn what an autobiography is and how to write one. You'll learn 4 common ways to identify yourself, and 3, how to write a call statement. A man whose writings have affected all of the English-speaking world is William Shakespeare. He was a playwright. He said, and I quote, "To thine own self be true," close quote. In order to be true to yourself, you must think about your entire self, not just the parts that make you look or feel great. If you are truthful when viewing yourself, then you can see similarities between yourself and others. To thine own self be true. As you write your autobiography, don't try to present yourself better than you are or worse than you are. Just present yourself as you are. My source for this presentation is Troy University. They suggest that there are various ways to identify, define, or think of yourself. Here are 4 ways: externally, internally, subjectively, and objectively. We'll take a look at each of these now. How do you identify yourself? Well, here are some suggestions. You can define yourself based upon externals. For example, your job or the position that you have. Maybe you're a writer, a full-time student, a minister of music at your church. Those have a tendency on the external side to identify you. Or maybe you have some tangible valuables. For example, you own a summer home in the Florida Everglades, or you own the very expensive Hope Diamond. That would help define you externally. We are more than just an external being. There are also things inside of us, so let's now look at the internals. For example, your personality characteristics. Are you kind, impatient, rowdy, optimistic? These qualities help make up what you are internally. Some of these qualities will be discovered as you take the biblical disc profile. You may want to use that as a part of your personal autobiography. You can identify yourself externally and then internally, but also objectively, that is, factually, without opinion, but based upon facts. Or you can define yourself subjectively, using creativity, uniqueness, or based upon the opinion that you have or maybe others have of you. Now, do you agree or disagree with this statement? What you see is not always what you get or all that you get. There's often more beneath the surface than there is on the surface. When you write an autobiography, it's just a way of identifying yourself in various ways. You can be very creative, you can be subjective, you can be objective, you can identify yourself internally or externally. And so it's a way of identifying yourself using various methods. It gives you a chance to be creative, and it gives you an opportunity to be intensely aware of yourself. We'll talk about this intensely aware of yourself in just a moment. But it's very important for us to know who we are, as Shakespeare said, "To thine own self be true." It is important to be intensely aware of who you are. And intense awareness can be powerful, and it can empower you as well. If someone is intensely aware of himself, then he can analyze his own limits and strengths, and not just rely upon the judgment of other people. A person who knows his limits or strengths can learn to trust his own judgment and not be afraid to use his own thinking skills in order to make decisions. Writing an autobiography can be done in the past, present, or the future. It just depends upon the purpose for which you're writing it. One key in writing about yourself is to have a destination. Know where you're going. Know where your story is going to end. That way you will know whether to choose past, present, or future tense. Another key to writing about yourself is to know yourself. You must have a good knowledge of who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what your personality includes, and what is excluded from your personality. Here are some suggestions for writing your autobiography. If you want to go backward, then prepare to focus on your history, or the history of your culture or your environment that made you into the person that you are today. So write or think in past tense if you're going in the direction of your history. If you want to stay where you are, then write about what's going on right now in your life or your environment. You will write in the present tense. An example of that would be writing in a journal. Or if you want to go forward, then you focus on your vision or your plans for the future. Write or think in the future tense. Here are some basic questions to ask yourself in preparing your autobiography. Where do I think I want to travel physically or emotionally? To the past, future, or nowhere? Am I prepared to reveal to others secret passages of my life? Am I prepared to revisit my entire past, the good and the bad parts? Am I happy, frustrated, or simply stuck in the present? Am I prepared to change my path if I run into an obstacle or think myself into a corner or a circle? Am I interested in exploring new routes in order to find my future? Are there images of my life that immediately or repeatedly come to my mind? The statements on this slide may help engage your mind in what you want to include in your autobiography. Certainly, all of these points would not be salient to the presentation of your autobiography, but some might. They might stir your imagination. So, what about stories you have heard about your birth or your earliest childhood memory? Describe it in detail. Your most vivid childhood experience, your school years, a special trip you have taken, a favorite meaningful thing or object you received from someone special, the first time you gave a speech or the first time you preached, the first time you wrote an essay, a time you hurt yourself, a very funny event, a time when you cried, your first bike ride, a memorable favorite book, a hospital stay, your first plane ride, a day you met someone famous, a death in the family, your first love, the day you realized the purpose for your life. Well, this certainly can stimulate your thinking, but also I want to encourage you to put your salvation experience and your statement of call to the ministry. In writing your autobiography, one of the most important parts is your call statement and your conversion experience. What is a call statement? Well, it tells why you are in the ministry. How were you called? Second part is, how are you gifted for ministry? What spiritual gifts do you see you having? What personality traits do you possess that help gift you for ministry? And then number 3, what ministry role do you feel yourself called to at this point? Where do you feel yourself moving in regard to the placement that God wants you to have for your calling? And then certainly you want to spend some time talking briefly about your conversion experience, how you came to know the Lord. Richard Niebuhr suggests that there are 4 calling components. Let me try to describe those for you. One is the call to be a disciple. That comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 2. We're all called to be holy. After being called to be a believer in Jesus Christ, we're called to be holy. M. Basil Pennington refers to this as God's persistent call. Every other aspect of Christian vocation owes its origin and meaning to this persistent call to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. The secret call is another aspect of the call that Niebuhr identified. The secret call has been identified by Fred McGahee as being God's grace call. It is that mystical call of God when we sense that He's setting us apart for some particular ministry in some particular sphere of His work. The providential call is God's call getting you ready for what it is that He has secretly called you to. The providential call has been going on from the very moment that you were born and took your first breath. The ecclesiastical call is God's call through other Christians. It's that invitation to become a pastor, or a youth pastor, or a minister of music, when you're called to a specific role in a unique and specific church. So Richard Niebuhr says we're called to be a disciple. There's a secret call, there's a providential call, an ecclesiastical call as well. Perhaps you might want to organize your call statement around these kind of component parts. Now let me sum up the task of writing a call statement. Decide where to begin. It's beyond the scope of this course for you to write an exhaustive autobiography. Again, just a few pages will do. Write an outline for the events you want to include. Then be sure to include your conversion and your call statement. Send your document to your field supervisor and professor of record on week 3, and discuss with your field supervisor your document in your initial meeting.